Assalamu alaikum. My name is Fadwa Wazwaz. I'm going to do a presentation today, and it's going to explore it's going to explore another video, from the theme, the men and women of faith, truth, and patience, guarding the heart for the day we stand before God. I'm going to be exploring in today's presentation temptation, fitnah, and the architecture of preparation, how Islam reframes the human moral struggle. There are two worlds, two anthropologies in much of Western thought. And I'm looking at Western thought. For one, I live in the West. I've explored Western thought based on, songs, humanities, writings, listening to various writers discuss in their own words, in their own worldview, Western thought. And it's also seems in today's time, it's seen as like the superpower on the block. So I can't explore, for example, Chinese worldview or the worldview in India because I haven't lived there. I haven't really explored that worldview through their arts and culture and how they think and how they feel and how they interpret things. So I look at Western thought. The other thing about Western thought is the nonstop discussion about the elephant in the room, and the elephant in the room is Islam. That's why I'm looking at these two worldviews. It's because of the discussion in the public square that is taking place. And today is going to be discussing on temptation, how it is discussed in the West, imagined as a seductive pull toward wrongdoing, psychological tug of war between desire and conscience, but it looks at it outwardly. The focus is on resisting the urge, fighting the sin, battling always an external force. And that's why you get a lot of othering in Western thought. Islam frames the human struggle very differently. As explored in my book, God intervenes between a person and their heart, drawing on the insights of Shaykh al Sha. So give credit where credit is due. This is where I learned this. And he had a whole section on why God created Satan. Because if you think about it, Satan tempts humanity. Solution would be you should destroy Satan. So the Qur'an does not center temptation as an external seduction. Instead, it introduces fitnah, a test, a pressure, a circumstance, an event that reveals what a person, what a society has built within themselves. The emphasis is not on resisting a momentary urge. The emphasis is on preparation, accepting God as Lord of the worlds, training you, testing you, purifying you, preparing you for the return. Western thought asks, how do I resist or exploit this temptation? If I can take you to this temptation loop, it goes something like this. Marketing recognizes what human beings incline to, what calls them, to buy, for example. They want to sell something and they realize sex sells. So they exploit desire. They manufacture scandal because rumors sell, tabloids sell. But then when they exploit that desire, the scandal, what you have is this predictable cycle. You glorify what tempts people, like I said, sex, scandal, rumors, outrage, hypersexualization, dangerous fantasies, objectification, and the aesthetics of seduction are packaged then as empowerment, entertainment, or just fun. So if I can do it, that means I'm free. That's, again, how the West sees freedom. If I can do it and I do it, it means I can free. There are no restraints. It means I'm free. There are no red lines. That means I'm free because if I got away with it, that means I'm free. That's Western thought and how freedom comes across and how it's promoted. If I can write what I want, if I can rage bait you and get away with it, therefore I'm free. So it sells the idea of no restraints equal freedom. No red lines equal freedom. No impunity equals freedom or victory, or I won. People imitate what they're taught to desire. Culture normalizes this indulgence, impunity, impulsiveness, risky behavior. People internalize these cues and they act on them. When the extreme form appears, society suddenly cries out for justice. We demand the Epstein files, for example. We express shock at the exploitation. We condemn the predatory behavior. But the same society, and again, I'm not attacking anyone personally. I'm presenting how things come across to me. If you disagree with that, I would like to hear your argument and correction. The same society celebrates the industries that sexualize everything. What is popular? What is the most popular industries and the most popular people? It rewards the aesthetics of danger and seduction. Which women currently right now, if we look at social media, which women are the most popular women in Western society? Who has the most followers? Who's the role models? People that are all following. It elevates celebrities whose branding depends on these dynamics. Consumes media that glamorizes the very behaviors we later call scandalous, which it doesn't reconcile with itself. You can't be promoting, a woman that calls to, someone to be like desire her. And then if he desires her, then it's like a scandal. Doesn't make sense. Because that's how we understand Satan. It's not this figure who's red and he has thorns and he looks ugly. No, Islam recognizes Satan like this. He calls to what is scandalous. And then when you accept the call, then he disassociates. And he's like, I fear God, the Lord of the worlds. And this is what is happening in the West. You're calling to things that are scandalous. The way, the twerking movement, the dressing in ways that call people to desire you. They're not married to you. And then when they do desire you, then you're like, oh, the cheating and the scandal and the rumor, but you're calling to it. You can't be calling to it and then criticizing it, disassociating from it after you call. This is how we view Satan in Islam. It's you call to scandal and then you're like, I disassociate, I fear God, the Lord of the world. It doesn't work that way. There's a loop here. Once you call to something, you carry that which you call. You become a participant in that which you called. So the loop is, again, the glorification of temptation, the indulgence, the scandal, the outrage, and then repeat. So we put the seeds in the ground for the temptation. We water that fruit, we water that tree, and then suddenly we don't like the fruit. A real example of this loop, just to show you what I mean. It's not like you go looking for it. You're on Instagram and you're just looking at, what's going on in Palestine. And so I see this ad on Instagram. A beautiful woman is robbed by a masked man. Maybe it's supposed to be fun, but again, it's scandalous in that you call to something. Even as fun, it harms. She pulls off his mask. And the ad is showing that he's extremely attractive, so attractive that she gives up the rest of her property that he didn't rob, and she jumps into his arms. But, in movies and other, cultural songs, you see that same type of scenario or this playing with fire mentality. It's not harmless. It's the normalization of danger as excitement. violation as romantic, exploitation as desirable, and then surrender to these temptations as empowerment. So if I give in, that means I'm free. Instead of if I recognize it for what it is, see the truth and the falsehood of what is taking place, and say no, have restraint. It's the opposite. In real life, danger is not sexy. Someone came at your home, doesn't matter what he looked like, it's not sexy. Predators are not romantic, exploitation is not empowerment. But yet marketing teaches people in movies and songs to desire what harms them. You know, go read a few romantic novels, if you will, just to better understand the thought process. Not my words, but the thought process, how people see romance. Society expresses shock when those harms appear in their extreme form. Islam breaks that loop entirely. It doesn't merely tell you to resist temptation, it tells you to retrain the heart so that temptation becomes hateful, not attractive. So a man sees a woman, instead of stealing her purse, that becomes repulsive. He shouldn't be stealing her purse. Or if she's pretty, he should be saying, like what Joseph said, I fear God, the Lord of the world. He should not be looking at her and lusting after her as a temptation. It should be repulsive. The very idea of that thought in their mind, vice versa, for a man towards woman or woman towards, it should be hateful. So this is the Quranic model. He made faith beloved to you and beautified it in your hearts and made disbelief, rebellion, and disobedience hateful to you. So Islam does not glorify seduction, objectification, dangerous fantasies, the aesthetics of exploitation. Islam says, do not normalize what harms you or harms others. You may not be impressionable, but other people may be impressionable, like little children who are, or teenagers that are following you and trying to imitate these celebrity women that are calling to seduction and the glorification of sin. So do not beautify what corrupts you. Beautify faith. Beautify repentance. Make repentance beautiful. Beautify that which brings you or helps you to return to God. Do not desire what leads to injustice, robbing, or in this case, the woman like jumps into his arms, or he may jump, into her arms. It's vice versa. Do not, glorify or desire what leads to injustice. The Quran reframes the entire conversation. The problem is not the scandal. It's not the fruit. The problem is what seeds did you plant, the preparation of the heart, what watering of seeds what seeds did you water, what tree did you water? The preparation of the heart long before the shock and the scandal and the tabloid morality and throwing mud at each other. Who started it? They started it. The society trains people to find sin attractive, to beautify and glorify temptations and sin. It's playing with fire. It will always be shocked by the consequences of its own training. Islamic direction, is freedom from the temptation economy and temptation loop. It takes you to a completely different direction. You're not supposed to beautify temptation as glamorous. You're not supposed to find sin exciting. At a certain point, it shouldn't be a temptation. And if it's a temptation, you have to sit with yourself and say, why is this a temptation? Why is this still pulling me? What is inside of me? Not how evil that person is, but what is inside of me that's making this a temptation? Why is there a pull? You're not supposed to find danger romantic. Somebody comes and robs you, you should be calling the police and making sure you report them. But when you try to glorify and beautify, there's a problem with that. If you read some romantic books, by the way, you will see just how much thought process in the glorification of danger and things are harmful are in those books. You're not supposed to find objectification empowering. You're supposed to find it repulsive. This is not because you're prudish. It's not like because romance is wrong. It's because if you see how it comes about through danger and through ways that is harmful. That when the worst case scenario happens, we start to like psychoanalyze it, and we recognize all the red flags. Yet they're there in the romance books. All these red flags are presented in a glamorous way. They're there in movies, they're there in songs. They're presented in glamorous ways. We don't say these are red flags. We say they're red flags when the Me Too movement rages. But these are red flags right there during the glorification, during the calling stage, during the fanatizing stage, fanatization stage, they're there. The romanticization stage, they're there. So you can't be romanticizing these red flags. And then when consequences hit, why are we romanticizing? Then you're like, these are red flags. And you still go about romanticizing these red flags. To continue, if we glorify the aesthetics, the industries, and the value system that the red flags built on the objectification, we cannot be surprised when exploitation emerges from that same soil. You can't call out the Epstein files while simultaneously celebrating and glorifying the cultural machinery that makes this Epstein-like behavior the outcome. So Islam takes us to, why does this still tempt me? Ramadan itself is an annual training in restraint. It's supposed to make you identify the red flags. This is a red flag. This is a red flag. This is a red flag. You're supposed to see the red flag. There is no glorification, and it's supposed to break that cycle. If there is no restraint, it wants you to build those restraints, not because the world becomes less tempting, but because the soul must be annually prepared and annually trained and annually retrained. The training continues. It's not a one-time event. It's an ongoing event. It's different than, again, the Western thought, which focuses again on the moment of desire. Islam focuses on the training and the soul, the state of the soul, before the moment arrives. So Qur'an asks a beautiful question. I mentioned that in my book, Love is Deeper Than Words. O mankind, what has seduced you from your Lord most generous? So sit with that question. What has seduced you from your Lord most generous? What illusion has pulled you away from God? What are you placing in rivalry with him? Your ego, your status, envy, or the need to appear superior? Now, this isn't aimed at anyone out there. This is a question for everyone to explore, because it didn't come for those people. It came for each and every one of us. So if you are reading this question and in your mind, you're thinking about everybody out there, then you're not actually doing reflection, you're doing projection. You're like, I can't look at it. All of us have work to do. All of us have work to do here. The tests are not one-time tests. They're ongoing tests. Until you exit this world, there'll be a test even as you exit this world. So you have to keep that in mind. This is not one-time test you pass and then that's it, you become a prophet. These tests will continue to keep coming over and over again. Once you pass one test, another test, and you pass this test, a bigger test. You pass this one, a bigger test. So you have to keep recognizing what these tests are, what the nature of these tests are, and what they mean to you, what they hold in meaning. This distinction becomes especially clear in Surah Al Sha, one of the most concise yet comprehensive summaries of the human condition. And all of the Quran is beautiful, but here I'm looking at Surah Al-Asr and reading the Quran. Like in the past, I said, read Surah Al-Fatiha and read the Quran. Take Surah Al-Asr and just read the Quran, looking at that lens of Surah Al-Asr throughout the Quran. Fitnah is not temptation, but it's revelation. It's kind of like it exposes what's inside of it. The Qur'an terms fitnah doesn't mean, exactly temptation, although you see it at times translated, that it means a test, a trial, a moment of pressure, a situation that exposes your inner state, condition that reveals your level of preparation. So it's not temptation in a sense like seduction, it's an assessment. And so you have to see fitnah as God is engaging you and giving you what you need to work on. Where Western thought says, I was tempted. So there is this constant, like, they'll talk about Satan and bash Satan and, so on and so on. Islam says, look inward. You were tested and the results revealed your preparation. Where Western thought says, I fell into temptation, the Quran says, you lacked firm resolve. Azm. So let me give it to you from the Quran, the story of Adam, upon and peace. Adam was given a command. Stay away from Satan, he's an enemy. Satan made it very clear he's going to go after Adam and bring down his downfall. It wasn't like assumption, it was clear as day. I'm going after him, I'm going to bring him down. Envy, jealousy. God warned Adam, stay away from Satan. He's a clear enemy to you. Satan comes to Adam as a sincere advisor. Adam listens to Satan because, he's thinking, he appears as a sincere advisor. He forgot the command. He listens to Satan. Satan brings him, causes him to slip. God becomes angry at Adam, upon him peace. But he says, but he forgot regarding Adam. He forgot, and we did not find in him firm resolve. So he received a command. He's supposed to be preparing himself for that command. Don't stay away from Satan. He's supposed to put in his mind, I'm supposed to stay away from Satan. So therefore, I have to train myself knowing that that test is coming. When that test comes, I should say, I fear God, the Lord of the world, and stay away. But he didn't stay. Adam, upon him peace, didn't fail because he was evil. It was because he forgot. He made no preparation. He failed because he hasn't built the resolve required for the test. When God gives you a command, know that a test is going to follow that command. Every command God gives you, a test is going to follow that command. So God didn't define him by his worst moment, though. He nurtured him, forgave him, granted him leadership, and prophethood. The test revealed the work he needed to do. Adam accepted that work. He accepted the training. He accepted the assessment. He sought forgiveness, sought mercy, transformed, became a vicegerent on earth. This is the Islamic human struggle model. His worst moment did not define him. We don't think of Adam as the sinner. We think of him as a prophet. We say, upon him be peace after his name. It prepared him. It trained him. It nurtured him. It elevated him. Adam becomes the archetype of the human condition. It's not about the original sin. It's about recognizing that relationship you have with God and accepting that you are going to be, until you exit this world, nonstop in tests, training, growth, tests, training, growth. You rise or fall not to desire or temptation, but to the level of your preparation, to the acceptance of the assessments that God gives you. Times will pass, at times will fail, then will pass or will fail, then will pass, then will fail. If you accept that struggle of what that means, doesn't mean you're bad. Nobody passes every test and every quiz. You're going to, fail, but you're going to get an assessment. You need to work on, X, Y, Z. You need to work on A, B, C, and then you pass. And then what you'll get next, another bigger test and a bigger test. And this is literally how the training and the nurturing in the relationship takes place. So the Quranic foundations of inner preparation. If you look, faith must become beloved to you. It's not a social club. It must become beloved to you. So he made faith beloved to you and beautified it in your heart and made disbelief, rebellion, and disobedience hateful to you. So once faith entered the heart, it must move out everything out of the heart that's in rivalry with faith. Disbelief, rebellion, disobedience, and it can only move it out by becoming hateful. This is not the language of resisting temptation. This is the language of recalibrating the heart so that temptation loses its appeal entirely. A man walks before you, he's like, let's just say, drop dead gorgeous. There should be no temptation. This is literally, the very idea of disobedience, rebellion, or disbelief should become hateful to you. A woman walks by, she's dressed scantily, and as a man, you can't keep saying it's a temptation. You have to reach the point where the very idea of you lusting after her should be hateful to you. That's what should be built in your heart. So faith must become beloved, sin must become repulsive. And you can only do that by, if you see, like to just say the thought, like Ghazāli said, sin must be repulsed at the level of thought. So in fact, he's the one who talked about metacognition, which is now very popular in today's age. But he talked about metacognition, that it has to be thought at the level of thought. As soon as you see a thought that's against, Islamic faith, understanding of faith, then you have to immediately say, this is wrong. And you have to respond to yourself. You know what thoughts are coming up, so you have to keep saying, this is ugly. I fear God, the Lord of the world. So it has to come to the point. That's the preparation that God is asking you to do. It has to be at the level of thought. You want to smack somebody, okay? Then you have to tell yourself, I fear God, the Lord of the world. You have to push that thought out of your heart. So it's continual recalibrating the heart, making these calls, thoughts that Satan throws at you, making them hateful to you. They should become hateful. So when the task comes where somebody is rage baiting you and you get to the point where you want to, like, just say, smack them, you already have prepared yourself not to respond in that manner. So there is that preparation that takes place. You have to keep going into like metacognition, like Al Ghazāli said, where you see, things that are you're called to that goes against your faith. And you have to, again, respond to yourself and say that this, I fear God, the Lord of the world. And so it becomes hateful to you. The very idea becomes hateful to you. So faith becomes beloved, sin becomes repulsive. This is called preparation. It's a call to freedom, so that when the test comes, and the test will come, no one can pull you to do such acts. So indeed, God doesn't change the condition of a people until they change what is within themselves. This is a Quranic law of transformation. No external force, not Satan, not society, not temptation, determines your fate. Change begins with your inner preparation. So obviously, we turn to God for guidance, we turn to God for help, we turn to God for aid. Fitnah simply reveals whether that change has occurred. Like I said, tests and quizzes says you need to do more training. Once you're done, there's still more as you move forward. Western culture, moral culture, often externalizes the moral struggle, focusing on the enemies, the othering, the temptations, the forces outside the self. This leads to blame, othering, and moralizing against them. Some might disagree with that. I'm willing to listen to your argument of why you disagree. But this is how I see it based on what I've read in Western moral culture. Islamic thought directs the believer inward. People are not aware, for example, even cursing Satan is discouraged. Prophet, upon him peace and blessings, taught that one should seek rather refuge in God instead of blaming Satan or cursing Satan, because this gives him importance. This says that Satan has power over us. Whereas we believe that God has power. And that's why the focus should be on God, remembering God and making God's presence, bringing God's presence in our sight, Is this, whenever we see a thought, is this pleasing to God? And not ignoring the real work that must be done within, which is, again, what thoughts did Satan throw in our mind? Is this pleasing or displeasing to God? The Qur'an roots this inward orientation. God beautifies faith inside the heart. God changes no condition until you change what is within. So we're constantly reminded as Muslims to do the inner work. Question that we have to ask ourselves. And here I'm not pointing at anyone personally, and I recognize there's some personal angst between me and some people, but this is not aimed at them. Why is this a temptation for you? Islamic ethics doesn't begin with fighting external temptation. It begins with transforming the inner self so that temptation loses its power. So again, the Surah Al-Asr, the blueprint for preparation. Looks at it in that humanity here in this chapter, in different reflections in other chapters. But in this chapter, it's about, there's the default group. We're all come in with default settings. And if we continue in that default setting mode, we will be in loss. There is the exception. It's those who prepare. The surah, I said in other posts, identifies 4 qualities that will save us from loss. Iman, or faith. And this requires knowledge. You can't have faith without knowledge. It doesn't reconcile. And so you can't have conviction without knowledge. A truth-centered world is where you're seeking knowledge and you're verifying and you're trying to clarify and you're making sure that you understand what it is you believe in. So it's based on conviction and a truth-centered worldview. But also it has to bear fruit. There has to be righteous actions associated with that faith. Faith is inward, but it has to bear fruit. If it's in your heart, then it has to be followed by righteous action, disciplined action. And some of those fruit or that tree, it has to have branches, and some of that has to be elevating the truth, clarifying the truth if someone's saying something that is wrong, clarifying it, correcting it if something is wrong, but also cultivating noble, patient responses. You can't be saying, I'm the most moral army, and, when the test comes, October 7th, 9/11, whatever test God allows to take place to society. This is how we look at 9/11, 10/7, or a lot of, situations that happen. It's a test. It's a test. And some tests are small, some tests are big. So you could call to international courts, you can call to tribunals, you can bring people together, transparency, follow international laws, make sure that restraints are followed. Then you're elevating truth and you're enjoining to patience and noble restraints. Or you can go to, there are no red lines and othering, and then just do whatever you want, promote impunity, promote, transgression of every red line and call it victory. But it shows that you are in default settings. You're in loss. You did not elevate truth. You did not elevate patience, meaning like there has to be red lines. Your responses must have red lines. Like you cannot transgress these bounds. And you'll see that throughout the Qur'an. The Qur'an says, do not transgress the bounds. Whenever you respond, do not transgress the bounds. These are the 4 forms of preparation required to withstand fitnah. Those in loss made no preparation. When the test came, they did not see the signs even of the test or the assessments. Like let's just say you have a test, someone gave you a C, okay? And then you recognize what you had to work, you took the test again, and now you got an A. So they just didn't even look at it as a test or that here, this is an assessment of where I'm at. They just kept into the othering, into the blame, how evil Satan and how evil this group is or that group is, Hamas, but nothing about looking inward. What did they prepare? What did they glorify before? What did they promote before? Nothing about transparency, about like having a tribunal of both parties, looking at their values, making sure, an eye for an eye, like I shouldn't be treating others the way I don't want to be treated. Nothing that kind of promotes truth or red lines that protects us from each other's evil. So those in loss not only didn't make preparation, but they did not accept the assessment from God. They remained in default settings for every test, every quiz, chasing mirages, claiming values they never built the capacity to live by. So we look at it, fitnah is a mechanism of loss. Fitnah is the moment where the four qualities of Surah Al-Asr are tested. Without faith, like you didn't seek knowledge, then the fitnah confuses you. It's going to confuse you, like 9/11 is going to be shock and awe. October 7th, shock and awe. Whatever happens, a tsunami is going to be shock and awe. Not righteous action, fitnah is going to seduce you. You haven't habituated yourself to treating others the way you wish to be treated and to not exploit, not glorify harm and oppression, then fitnah is going to seduce you. Without truth, fitnah is going to manipulate you. Without telling the whole story, like, there's occupation taking place, that Gaza is surrounded, it doesn't have power over its heirs, sea, borders, it's going to manipulate you. People are just going to go ahead and just amplify how awful October 7th is, how awful October 7th, while you're bomb. And people are just saying it because people in power are saying it. So it's going to manipulate you without being a truth-centered person. Without patience, it's going to break you. How is it going to break you? You're going to be transgressing every red line. Every red line. And this is how Moses described the Pharaoh. He said, they will transgress all bounds. All bounds. So without that preparation of restraint, it's going to break you, meaning that your soul is going to be killed. Your heart is going to be killed. And you're just going to transgress all lines, thinking, I have impunity, therefore I'm free. Impunity doesn't mean freedom. Impunity means transgressor. It doesn't mean freedom. So fitnah doesn't create weakness of the self. It reveals it and tells you this is what you need to work on. So again, it's temptation versus fitnah. Every Muslim knows the test is coming. Every Muslim must know the test is coming. Every Muslim knows that we will not pass every test, every quiz, and it's not a one-time moment. It's ongoing tests, ongoing training, ongoing preparation, ongoing, going back to the basics and, continual process of preparation. The Western framing is temptation is an external pull. So it focuses external. We have to control the external forces. This is the Western framing. We have to control Hamas, destroy them from existence. We have to control this group and that group and this group. Islam is about putting boundaries between you and that which calls you away from God. So we don't even destroy Satan. Calls you away from God. But Islam is not. You can't even curse Satan. You put a boundary between you and Satan. You focus on God. So the struggle is resisting desire. Failure is moral weakness from an Islamic, usually from a Western sense. Islamic framing, fitnah is a test. The test is coming. God says it in the Qur'an over in many chapters. The test is coming. That's you should be prepared for that test. Every command has a test that's going to be testing you. So it's going to expose your inner state. Struggle is preparation before the test. The failure is the lack of resolve. You may have forgotten or you may have glorified. It's not seduction. It's all about preparation, training, accepting the assessment, and doing the work to pass the next test. The results show what you must build next. This is why the Quran rarely uses the word equivalent to temptation. If you have to look at it in a summarized or in a more, and then expand it further to help people understand. So the central concept is preparation, or jihad al-nafs. It's an ongoing process. Another example from the Quran, from the Hadith, when is the hour? The prophetic reframing. A man once asked the Prophet, on peace and blessings, when will the hour be? Prophet replied, what have you prepared for it? The man answered, nothing except that I love Allah and His Messenger. So he loves God. So the Prophet, upon him peace and blessings, said, you will be with those whom you love. So loss is failing to prepare. If you're taking God as the center and that you love Him and the Messenger, you're naturally going to follow that which you love. You're not going to be following celebrities, And here I'm referring to, celebrities that are calling you to what you believe is a sin. It's not just Muslims or Sharia law that's telling you this is a sin. You believe it's a sin because when the scandal happens, you spend tremendous amount of time talking about the scandal, condemning people for the scandal, and then disassociating from it. But then you're still promoting, the lusting after each other on stage. You're still promoting the sexualization of men and women on stage. So how could you be promoting the sexualization of men and women and then condemning men and women who give in to the temptation of that sexualization? It just doesn't reconcile, because an argument must reconcile with itself. You can't be calling to the sexualization of men and women and then be like condemning men and women who give in to that temptation. That's what Satan looks like, or in Islam. He calls to sin, and he's like, I disassociate, I fear God, the Lord of the worlds. But that's what we see happening in Western culture. It calls to the sexualization of men and women, even children. Then it's like, I fear God, the Lord of the worlds. And then you start having this scandal, and, the real work has to be that sexualization of men and women has to go. That's where the work needs to be. That's what Islam's response is. Don't tell me about the scandal. Don't tell me about, why this person cheated or that. Tell me about why you're glorifying and you're sexualizing men, turning them into, sexual objects on stage. That's where the conversation, why is this a temptation? Why are you glorifying and beautifying this temptation? So you do not rise to the level of your intention, you rise or fall to the level of your preparation. So fitnah at the end of life, the final exposure, these tests, like I said, will keep coming to the end of your life as you exit. Classical scholars describe. Satan may attempt to confuse a dying person appearing as a loved one, a religious figure, a false savior, or a voice of despair, a source of doubt. Again, this is not just temptation. This is a test. It's a fitnah. It's an exposure of your inner state. You know what's coming. So what have you done to prepare for it? Satan cannot imitate the Prophet, upon him peace and blessings. Whoever sees me in a dream, the Prophet said, has truly seen me, for Satan cannot imitate me. So this ties directly to the hadith of preparation. If you prepared by loving God and the Prophet, on him peace and blessings, you will be with those you love. You will be with him. So again, Islam reframes that human struggle. It does not view humans as creatures constantly battling external temptation. It views them as beings placed in a world of training and tests. where the outcome depends on what you have built within themselves. So loss is remaining in the default setting. Verily, mankind is in loss. Preparation is the exception. So the Quran invites me and every human being to move from the default to the prepared. So prepare. If, this is heavy with Quran and it's uncomfortable to you, Shakespeare, I mentioned one time this from Shakespeare in poetry, what win I if I gain the thing I seek? What win I? Like whatever it is that you desire, what do you win if you gain it? Because Islam asks the same question. O mankind, what has deceived you concerning your Lord, the most generous? What has seduced you? What illusion has pulled you away from what is right? What are you placing in rivalry with God, ego, status, envy, or the need to appear superior? Now, this is not a question for one particular person. It's a question for each and every one of us that Islam, the Quran calls us to reflect on individually, to sit down and to have that exercise with ourselves. What illusion has pulled you away from what is right? Nothing rivals God in your heart, then Satan has no power over you. And Islam goes further. If something still tempts you, means you have not yet prepared for the assessment. That's what the whole story of Joseph is about. Now, it's done in a way that I think, because the rationalizations that men make, you see women make it here. So it kind of that's how I saw it. So it forces men to reflect on their rationalizations that they make for claiming, she's a temptress, she's a seductress, blah, blah. And it shows them how those rationalizations do not fly with God. So if this woman is a temptress, then be Joseph. She's a seductress, then be Joseph. It's saying you have to prepare yourself for the test. So if people responded to seduction with the integrity of Prophet Joseph, peace be upon him, with clarity, with restraint, God consciousness, then the manipulation, the exploitation, the predatory behavior would lose their power. Entire industries built on exploiting temptation and desire would collapse. And not just, and the story doesn't just talk about the temptation, it also talks about the tabloid morality. I finished a theme about the men and women of the city. It also talks about the exploitation and the tabloid morality. Because their influence depends on unprepared hearts. The men and the women in the city did not prepare their hearts. They didn't prepare their tongues. They didn't prepare their hearts to say no to desire. And so when they were called, all of them fell. Zulaykha was not the only one who fell. The women in the city fell. The men fell when they had to do justice. They were overpowered by their desires. So it looks at it exactly how we see a temptation is glorified, and then how the scandal happens, and then how tabloid morality takes over. But the real solution, justice, is never really faced. So what happens? Joseph is put in prison. And Joseph here represents the soul. We put our soul in prison, and we continue with the glorification of temptations, desires, the scandal, the tabloid morality, the rumors, and on and on and on. We stay in that temptation loop, and we stay in that state of loss. We don't normalize preparation. We don't normalize that sin is not tempting. It's repulsive. And we don't normalize freedom. So even though Joseph was in prison, he was free. And they were actually oppressed. And he was free not by destroying them, he was free by placing a boundary between him and them. I'm not going to let you pull me in that direction. So, reflective question for me and for you. What inner state is still allowing this temptation to appeal to me? Why is it a temptation? What do I need to do to make this temptation hateful to me? Because that's part of faith. If anything that calls you away from God, anything that is a disobedience, a rebellion, a defiance, you must work on making it hateful to you. What does that reveal about the work that I have to do if it is a temptation? And for the men, given that summer is coming, particularly Muslim men, I don't want to hear about the temptation. What work do you need to do so that temptation is no longer a temptation and that temptation is repulsive to you? And also for women, if some women are in that state, usually, if we look at the industry that it's built upon, it usually is men that struggle with that temptation. So the dua that I leave you with, for me and for you, oh Allah, beautify faith in our hearts, make sin repulsive to us, make disobedience, rebellion, defiance repulsive to us. Grant us firm resolve. Prepare us for the day we stand before you. Do not leave us to our own selves, even for the blink of an eye. Make us among the people of faith, truth, and patience, those who prepare, and those whom you save from loss. Amen. Thank you very much. Assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh.